Hey folks, David Watts here with a video specifically focused on the iPhone 12 Pro Max. And there's a million of these kind of videos on YouTube right now. Great new phone, fantastic. I'm not interested in the screen, the battery, all the features, the functionality. I'm interested in one thing, the photography aspect. As a photographer, that's my interest. Can we use the iPhone 12 Pro Max, and this might apply to the other models as well, but the 12 Pro Max is what I have. Can we use the 12 Pro Max to effectively create really beautiful portraits? Now that's interesting to me because I love the Fujifilm system. I use the Fuji X-H1 with the 90mm f2 lens. It's a fabulous lens for portrait work, and I'll show you an example of that in just a moment. But it is a lot to lug around. And I'm curious, in the right kind of circumstances, can we get really nice results from the new iPhone 12 Pro Max? So that's what we want to look at today for just a few moments. A small point of interest, if you like binaural type audio recordings, this is being recorded that way. It's an interesting subject, just a more immersive way to capture sound. So we're experimenting with that. Let me know if you like that. You'll need to use a headset to listen if you want a more full sort of immersive audio experience. I'm not doing anything in particular that takes advantage of it, but it's still a little more of a full experience if you like that kind of audio. So feel free to put your headphones on and let me know what you think. So what we'll do is we'll flip over to the screen in just a moment. But I have a favorite spot close to where I live, not far from Dallas, where I enjoy taking portraits. And so I went there, took my son as a willing victim to do a little bit of portrait work and test this out just a bit. Now, the standard sort of principles for portrait work always apply, no matter what phone you're using. We need good light. Don't try to do this. Don't try to take outstanding portraits unless you really have an interesting idea that you're trying to achieve. Don't try this in the middle of the day in the blaring sun. You can do some things, but make it easier on yourself if you have the option. Later in the afternoon, maybe the last hour, hour and a half, 2 hours of sunlight, maybe a place where you've got some shade, but yet some interesting lighting, where you've got a little bit of space. Those same principles apply. Number two, allow for that sort of distance between your subject and the background. Now, the telephoto lens in the iPhone 12 Pro Max is an f2.2 lens. From my testing so far, and to get good bokeh, to get a blurry sort of background that we tend to like for portraits, that's not essential, but we tend to like that. To get that kind of blurry portrait style background, you need to get as close to your subject as possible and have a good bit of space between your subject and the background. That's when you can really maximize that bokeh. In my opinion, the lens on the iPhone 12 Pro Max, the 62mm, 65mm lens, whatever it is, not quite enough natural bokeh for my taste. But use the portrait mode. And so that's what I was really testing today. Is the portrait mode good enough? Does it look fake? Is it effective? And you'll recall this, that the camera does computational photography to achieve this sort of bokeh and background, blurred background, out of focus background. Does it do an effective job? We'll take a look in just a moment. I think it does. So, but allow for good lighting, allow for some space, allow for some interesting background that whether you're using natural bokeh or the computational photography, the portrait mode, that can make for an interesting subject. And so those are just a couple of the basic principles, and we'll dive into a few more as we look at some of the photos. So let's jump over to the screen, and I'll do some screen recording and intersperse this in. So first and foremost, I've got two images up on the screen. And this is not a comparison between, an APS-C sensor camera and an iPhone. That's not the point of this. I see a lot of those videos. That's not terribly interesting to me. Each camera's got its strengths and weaknesses. Like every one of us as individuals, we have our strengths, we have our weaknesses. Every camera system is the same way. It's kind of pointless to endlessly compare. Instead, take a system, maximize it for the best possible outcome. And that's what we're interested in here. But I did just want to show you very briefly a contrast. Here on the right side of the screen, what we have is a result from the Fuji X-H1, the 90mm f2. Fabulous. You can see it totally obliterates the background. Perfect sort of washing out of the details. That's a city, that's a small town. There's buildings there, but you really can't tell. It does a fabulous job. On the left side, the framing is not exactly the same. The subject was in the same place. I had to change my position a bit. The focal length of the lenses are different. But you see an example here using the computational photography that it achieves a pretty good result. We could tweak that, of course, with the settings, but I took this straight out of the camera. Both images are straight out of the camera, no edits whatsoever. So you can see that while the framing is different, you get a pretty decent result. So just sharing that just to show that it is possible not to achieve the identical results we get with an APS-C or a full frame camera, but to achieve good results that are pleasant and effective, frankly, as portraits. Now let's flip over. I'm a big fan of Luminar. So let's go to Luminar and dive in just a bit. I wanted to show this, even though it's not a subject of a portrait, but this is taken with the standard telephoto lens. The point being, if you can get close enough to your subject, just this little grain or weedy sort of thing, you will get some interesting, natural sort of out of focus areas. This was not done with portrait mode. So just a reminder, you can get some interesting effects that way. But we're more interested in what we can achieve with portrait mode using the 12 Pro Max, the telephoto lens. So let's take a couple of examples here. These are, I think, particularly my favorite. So in this case, I'm really testing the lens and pushing it to its limits because we're backlit here. There's a tree back here. And so the sun is peeking through, and I kept changing the angle up just a bit. And you see we do get some lens flare and some spots, but frankly, I kind of like that. It gives it a little dimensional look. I think it does an outstanding job here. And you could probably point out, if we zoom in, you can see a little bit of fringing here on both sides. You can see some over here, but you might get that with any lens, apart from the portrait mode that the iPhone tries to apply. You might get that sort of thing with most lenses. This is pretty challenging, shooting into the sun, backlighting a subject. I think it does an amazing job of really focusing on the face, giving us that out of focus sort of background and a really impressive portrait, I think. Now, here's a second example. Again, we're backlighting a little bit. This time we've got the sun coming in from the upper right. Again, a little bit of lens flare. I personally like it. You may not, but just trying to show that it is possible to get some, I think, very effective sort of portraits with an iPhone, the 12 Pro Max. You would get something quite similar on the other models, but you get some good results here. Again, all we're doing, we're in the portrait mode, which activates the 62, 65 millimeter telephoto lens. We're getting as close as we reasonably can to the subject. We're trying to frame them in a reasonable way. We're trying to have an interesting background behind the subject. And, you know, we are getting, again, this is straight out of the camera, no edits whatsoever. We are getting some, you know, interesting little bokeh balls or simulated sort of bokeh balls. But if you just look at it as a picture, as a portrait, and avoid the technical analysis, I think it does a very effective job. And you get, I think, good, realistic fall off of focus. If you look here at the edge of the glasses, as we move back and we get toward the ears, out of focus. This all seems quite realistic to me. Let's see, just a couple other photos. This, by the way, was again from the Fuji X-H1, and you will notice the same sort of, once this sort of clarifies or processes, you will notice the same sort of fall off in focus as we go back toward the ear. Very similar, really, to what we see with the iPhone. Other images real quick. Again, we get as close as we can and achieve the framing we want. I think we see good lighting control. There's no flash here, by the way, no artificial light. Did not even use a reflector. That would be an option, certainly, if you like natural light, to supplement with a reflector. But I think it just does a really great job. Again, will it do the same job as a full-size or as a Fuji APS-C or a Sony full-size or any of the others? No, it'll do a different job. But will it do a great job in the right circumstances and the right setting? I think it will. And yet then it brings other advantages to the table. So, you know, you've got the ability with a very small package that fits in your back pocket to take these kind of portraits and literally within 30 seconds of taking those portraits, be able to do quick edits, submit them to social media. You can even print these at a significant size and have a really great portrait. Again, it's not a question of whether, oh, the Sony will do this a little better, or the Fuji will do this a little better, or the iPhone does this a little better. Each will do something great. Each will have some weaknesses. The point we should be striving for is to maximize the benefits, maximize the strengths, and then achieve great things. So that's what I wanted to show you briefly. We might do more of these kind of videos. Hope that might encourage you. You might, it might be that, funding does not currently permit another camera system. My point is, with something like the iPhone 12 Pro Max, you can do great portrait work if that's the kind of work you'd like to do. Anyway, I hope that might help a little bit. If you like the video, give us a thumbs up. Subscribe. We'll try to post some others. As you notice here, we're kind of into the no-nonsense sort of videos. I don't do a bunch of graphics and a bunch of, introductions and teasers and clickbait. We just try to get straight to the point. Hope it's helpful. Have a great day.